Mr. President, I want to follow up on the statement made by the Republican Senate leader, and I agree with many of the things he said. We disagree with others. But there is a way for us to show our commitment not only to our troops and to the defense of causes that are important to America, and it's in his hands. It's known as the Appropriation Bill for the Department of Defense. It's known as the Appropriations and Budget for the United States of America. Where are we now? We're on something called a continuing resolution. That means we haven't decided. We can't get an agreement from the Republican leader to move forward on the spending bills for this fiscal year, which began October 1st. We're spending at last year's levels when the Biden administration has asked for more money for the nation's defense. And who is stopping them? The Republican leader. So we can't have it both ways and argue we need to invest more in the defense of America and then stop us from an appropriations process that does just that. Let's get it done. This should have been done before last October 1st, and his cooperation means it can be done now. Now let me say there's another aspect to it. Many speeches are given about the rise in crime in America. I know this personally, representing a state of Illinois and the great city of Chicago. The number of violent gun crimes in this last calendar year was just shocking. When you look at all of the people that have been hurt and killed with the use of guns in cities across America, it's clear we need to invest in our police force and law enforcement, hold them accountable for the right values and the right conduct, but put in their hands the resources to protect us in our homes and our neighborhoods. What's holding that up? The same decision by the Republican leader not to bring any appropriation bills forward for approval by the Congress. This is just mindless. You can't preach on one hand that you want to fund the police and then stop the appropriation process, which the Republicans in the Senate have done. It is time to pass the omnibus appropriation bill so the resources are going to ATF and to U.S. Attorney's Office and other law enforcement agencies that can help the state and local law enforcement efforts to try to suppress this violent crime. So don't preach about the need for this money and then turn around and stop the effort here on Capitol Hill. Why aren't we voting on an omnibus appropriation bill this week? Why? Why can't we get this done next week? It was supposed to be done last October. It is time for us to do it. And let me say a word about the Ukrainian situation. I feel strongly about this. As a co-chair of the bipartisan Ukrainian caucus, I have followed for years what's been going on in this country. There is one guiding principle that we should acknowledge. The fate and future and decision-making for the Ukrainian people should be in the hands of the Ukrainian people. Not in Washington, not in Moscow, not in Bonn, not in Minsk, but in Kyiv, and the Ukrainian people across that country should have the right to do it. The question about their future and their solidarity and their defense comes down to the fact that they were invaded 8 years ago by Russia, that took over the Crimean province and then went on to expand their military force, the little green men, the so-called little green men that are just Russian surrogates that are fighting in the eastern part of Ukraine. Is it any wonder that the Ukrainian people look to NATO and other forces to protect them? They've been invaded. For 7 or 8 years, they've lost thousands of their citizens innocently who died in defense of their country. And for us to stand in defense of Ukraine and their efforts to make their own decisions for their future just makes sense. Ultimately, we may have theories on what the future should be, but it is their country. They are the people who rule it, and we respect their sovereignty. And I would just say that as far as Vladimir Putin is concerned, I know his style. I've seen it for a long, long time. We see the continuing threats that the Russians have against the Baltics, for example. These are small, independent, democratic countries that fought long and hard for that opportunity. And they are constantly menaced by Vladimir Putin and his Russian forces. The same is true for Poland. It's important that we stand behind the NATO alliance, and one way to help the NATO alliance is to pass an appropriation bill that will give our resources promised to the alliance to them instead of being stonewalled, as we have been, by the Republican leadership on that matter. It's long overdue that we get to that question.